الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the Maradiya show where we're meeting Muslims where they are. I'm your host, Shadid Muhammad. Today's topic, we're going to talk about something that's very important to us as Muslims, especially in this climate of Islamophobia where the campaign, the smear campaign against the name of our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam has been kind of rehashed. You know, tarikh yu'idu nafsa, history kind of repeats itself. And so what we're seeing is nothing new. The Quraysh, they tried to smear the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's name. And during that time, he had Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to defend him. Wallahu ya'asimuka minan nas, that Allah will protect you from the people. Inna Allah yudafi'u 'anil ladina amanu, that Allah will defend those who believe. And we find all throughout the Qur'an where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala defended the honor of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. وَمَا هُوَ بِقَوْلِ كَاهِنٍ, to the end of that. فَأَيْنَ تَذْهَبُونَ, now where are you going to go? After he's refuted everything that was said about his qualities and his characteristics. Today, fast forward to 2015, we see, you know, this campaign being rehashed using terms that are vile and reprehensible and, you know, just totally disrespectful to the name of our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So tonight, inshallah ta'ala, we want to look at some of these misconceptions and we want to deal with them head on for two reasons. One is we want to tackle this argument to do our duty to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to the second part of our shahada, and that is defending the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And secondly, to provide the young Muslims with some ammunition, if you will, in, you know, how to defend yourself when you are cornered with these types of accusations and misconceptions, whether in college, on college campuses, whether on the internet. Wherever you may find yourself, you'll find that people will try to corner you with things like, well, is Muhammad a pedophile because he married a girl at 9 years old? Or he consummated the marriage with a girl at 9 years old? Was Muhammad a womanizer because he had multiple wives? And sometimes as young Muslims, when you don't know how to defend yourself, we kind of get caught in the middle of that, really not knowing how to respond. And in some instances begin to, you know, accept some of these things that are being said and, you know, leaving room for shaitan to creep in and create doubt about the second part of our shahada. So, inshallah ta'ala, we're just going to kind of jump right into some of these misconceptions bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. The first thing that I want to deal with is many people assert that the religion of Islam is oppressive towards women and that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a womanizer because he had multiple wives, and that Islam is a very chauvinistic religion that caters to men. How do we respond? What is the appropriate response to these type of accusations? And I'll start with my right.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah. Tomorrow, inshallah, I'm going to do a more in-depth issue concerning the correct way, inshallah, of defending the Nabi. Salawatullahi wassalamuhu alayhi. So what we don't deal with here today, we'll try to cover and expand more tomorrow. But in terms of the question, the issue that's on the table right now, if anyone was fair and they were just and they looked at the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and how he dealt with all of these issues, no doubt would be left in a person's mind that he actually came to free the woman and to protect the woman, and he was the first one in the line to do that. But before giving you some examples, and I'm sure the other brothers are going to give some examples, I think it's very important in dealing with these issues that we are not people who are apologetic and that we're not weak. We establish unequivocally what Allah mentioned in the Qur'an, وَلَيْسَ الذَّكَرُ كَالْأُنْثَى, that ayat was revealed because of the birth of Maryam. Maryam. So we're going to say very clearly, men are one way and the women are another way, and there are some overlaps and parallels, but there are also some clear distinctions. If you have a problem with that, your problem is not with me. I can just do my best to try to explain it to you, but I will not ever apologize for one harf of this religion. So I think that's very important. If a person were to look at the time that the Prophet was sent, alayhi salatu wasalam, he would have seen clearly that women were oppressed to a degree that we can't fathom. And one of the benefits of studying his seerah is that you come to realize his life is a mu'jiza, is a miracle. And Allah gave miracles to prophets so that the people can believe. So as a Muslim, when I look at the state of Quraysh during that time, their society was built on the structure of oppression, racism, kufr, shirk, everything evil. They had some good things, and from that was the way they dealt with women. Can you imagine being a man who has some daughters? When your daughter comes out of the womb of the mother, it comes out as a daughter, and the mother is willing to hand the child over to the men of the community, and they go bury that daughter alive. It's the mentality of that. And then the Prophet brought a religion, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that was radical with those ayats and those ahadith. وَإِذَا الْمَوْءُودَةُ سُئِلَتْ بِأَيِّ ذَنبٍ قُتِلَتْ. That baby is going to have. Yeah. Why were you killed? And that was telling those people of Quraysh, hey, I am personally challenging the status quo. So that would be the first thing, that from the inception of the time that that little girl is born, his religion brought something, rules, regulations in defense. And she wasn't even born yet. That's before she was born. Once she's born, Al-Islam protected her. As she grew, Al-Islam protected her. Became a mother, Al-Islam protected her. So as it relates to this issue, I think this one thing is one of the easiest shubahat or ambiguities that can be dealt with.
Let me just move on to Muhammad Elshinawy. When someone says that Muhammad was a womanizer because he had multiple wives, and this basically gives Muslim men the right to just exercise their sexuality without restriction, and that marriage is between one man, one woman, and when you got, this role model, this leader who's supposed to be teaching us discipline, marrying multiple wives, and some instances maybe 9 wives or 12 wives or things like this. How do we respond to that? Was Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was he a womanizer?
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, sallallahu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. I think first and foremost, like the Shaykh Hafidahullah was mentioning, that context is huge, right? And perhaps the inconsistency of the human mind is good to clarify for us that the human mind cannot be always a good gauge to understand from different perspectives, different contexts. And just because a person cannot understand something from a rational perspective, once again, does not mean it's necessarily incorrect. Because even our gauges of correct and incorrect are changing from age to age. Absolutely. That's first and foremost, right? 30 years ago, it was not just perceived incorrect in the opinions of men that marrying a person of the same gender was something that's evil. This is something that in the manuals of medicine there was medications for, right? Right? And now a person objecting to that same scenario, right, in a different context, from a different perspective, this is something seen as despicably intolerant, disgusting, right? This is an issue. When, for example, the concept of love, which is as human as, breathing, eating, and drinking, can be polluted in our context. I had a young man who became Muslim, was trying to run through Sahih al-Bukhari, and he came across the hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha in Bukhari and Muslim, where the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam kissed one of his grandsons, Al-Hassan al-Hussein. So he said to him, Ya Rasulullah, atuqabbiluna as-subyan, you kiss your boys? And so the context from which this question is being asked, right, is the reason why it was being asked. Had he not been polluted in his screen by which he looked at the world, his lens, he would not have asked the question. He would have found it in himself to just read the end of the hadith. Because the hadith shows that it wasn't a kiss of passion, it was a kiss of mercy. Because the man, Al-Aqra' ibn Habis, was a man that was saying being rough and tough, he was a Bedouin. We don't kiss boys. He wasn't speaking about anything of that nature. So he said to him, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, would you accept it? What can I do for you if Allah has pulled the mercy from your heart? So the context skews things a great deal. Looking at the issue of women, look at the context. Look at how a woman hears. One of the many misconstrued ahadith about looking down upon women, speaking down to women, being a womanizer. The hadith of, "O women, give in charity, for I have seen that you are a majority of the people of the fire." A woman in a certain context hearing a certain amount of bombardment about womanizing and talking down to women and being misogynistic and say, this is disgusting, right? Just because she's a woman, she's bound for the fire. But because of the context of the listeners in the time of the Prophet ﷺ who knew how to look at him, their reaction was completely different. Jabir radiallahu anhu, the narrator of the hadith, says the women immediately, when they heard that, they knew this was the plea of someone who cared for them. Not someone who was condescending, someone who was fearful of them nearing that fire. They said, so they put their hands under their garments, they removed their earrings, they removed their bracelets, a completely different reaction.
Even the narration mentioned that a woman stood up and said, is it because we're women? Going back to the context of how women were viewed prior to his emergence as a prophet. During that society, women were considered, a liability. Hence the fact that they would bury them alive as kids. So when a woman heard the Prophet ﷺ say that, she stood up and she said, okay, are we going back to that old mentality? Is it because we're women? And he clarified, no, it has nothing to do with the fact that you're women. So even in the context of the hadith, you draw the same point that you're making. Not to cut you off, but I want to give everyone an opportunity to chime in on this. Brother Muhammad, Muneer, the one that's known as Mufti. If someone was to say that your prophet, your messenger, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was a womanizer because he had multiple wives and he encourages his community to have multiple wives, how do we respond? How do we encourage our young Muslims who go to college and have to intermingle with people of different faiths and have different understandings of Islam? How do you encourage them to respond to these type of accusations?
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillahi amma ba'd. After praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I would like to thank you and thank my esteemed elders, mashayikh, and also the brothers and sisters in the crowd for me being invited and requested to come and speak on this panel and on this show, bi'idhnillahi subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is hopefully a blessed show. So that's first and foremost. After thanking Allah, thank you for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here, only Allah knows. That's first and foremost. Secondly, I would say, to piggyback off of what Abu Usamah with Muhammad Elshinawy, and also what you mentioned, before we even get that far, let's go to the English language. What is a womanizer? When you go to the dictionaries and the lexicons, what is the definition, not according to the Muslims, not according to the Middle East or North Africa, but the Western non-Muslims, how do they define the term a womanizer? What does a womanizer mean? When you look into the dictionary, a womanizer is any man who has numerous, spontaneous, short-lasting sexual relations with a woman. So, let's ask a question, not according to our definition, but your definition. How many short, spontaneous, short-lasting sexual relations did Muhammad have with women? Let's look in the authentic hadith and the weak hadith. How many? Where was the Prophet ﷺ married and divorced? Where did the Prophet see a woman, take off her clothes, and then say, go, leave? Where? Just bring me one narration, and then we can move on to the next step. Rather, on the contrary, we have evidence that supports the opposite. When the woman entered upon the Prophet ﷺ, it says in the narration, she said, A'udhu billahi mink. She said, I seek refuge in Allah from you. One narration states that the Prophet ﷺ said, لَقَدْ عُذْتِ بِمُعَاذ. وفي رواية, لَقَدْ عُذْتِ بِعَظِيمٍ إِلْحَقِي بِأَهْلِكِ. He says, indeed, you have sought refuge in someone who's great and mighty. Go back to your family. Go back to your family. So let's ask the question. If Muhammad was a womanizer, why did he instantly send this woman back to her family? Why didn't he say, take off your clothes, come and let's do that? If he was a womanizer. How often did the Prophet have these spontaneous engagements? Sahil ibn Sa'ad al-Sa'idi radiallahu anhu, the noble companion, he reported that the Messenger of Allah was standing one day and a woman came to him and she presented herself for marriage. She said, oh Messenger of Allah, I want you to marry me. The narration says, فَصَعَدَ فِيهَا النَّظَرَ وَصَوَّبَ. He looked at her from top to bottom and he says, I'm sorry, I can't help you. He said, kindly, politely, I'm not interested. The Prophet ﷺ, he was a human being. For one reason or another, he wasn't interested in this woman. Would a womanizer do that? In our culture, there is a rule, never turn down a woman. Never say no to a woman. Is this not the case?
Absolutely.
And there are statements that are worse than this that I won't mention right now. It's a rule of Jahiliyyah. Never turn down. That's a womanizer.
She giving it to you.
That's a womanizer. Someone who abuses women, who berates women, who misuses women. And wallahi, we go on and on, hadith after hadith, in which the Prophet ﷺ refused contact with women. One last narration. A narration of Aisha radiallahu anha, which she said that the Prophet ﷺ never touched the hand of a woman that he wasn't allowed to touch. He was the Prophet of God. Give me your hand, give me the oath of allegiance, touch my hand, I'm Allah's messenger. My heart was purified, it was washed. La, he would give the signal when they gave their bay'ah. The Prophet ﷺ, he had the ability, the power to do whatever he wanted to do. Wealth, Quraysh offered him. Women, status, prestige. He turned these things down. So from in my humble opinion, just a rational, logical standpoint, that claim doesn't make sense that Muhammad was a womanizer. You may say this, you may say that, but come on, you can't be serious saying he's a womanizer. And he refused women.
We just play with the jargon. Oh, he was a womanizer. We just throw these terms around without, and it's a good point that you go into the definition, because a lot of times we play with terms and we allow, for example, Muslim women are oppressed. What do you mean? What does oppression mean? Okay, and so for you young Muslim brothers and sisters that are in college that have to engage people on a daily basis, one of the ways, as Brother Muhammad is giving us here, is to always make them define their terms and don't just go with the jargon. Don't just allow people to say to you this or that and you just go with the flow. Make them define what the term means. If Muhammad was a womanizer, okay, what is a womanizer? If Muslim women are oppressed, what do you mean by oppressed? Because oppression can differ from one person to the next depending on the context in which you're using it, depending on the person that you're talking about, depending on the country that you're using the term oppressed. We may say, the fact that I go into McDonald's after hours and they don't want to give me food, but they will throw it in the garbage, they're oppressing me, right? Whereas you might go to another country and they may interpret that as something different. You understand what I'm saying? So in oppression and all of these terms that we're using, it's important that as Muslims we make people define what they mean and we hold them accountable to their terms. To the terms that they use, we're going to use your terms in light of the way that you use it. Which moves me to my next point, which is one that we hear all the time. I actually had a Muslim email me saying that he or she was stumped when they were asked the same question. And I hate to use the term, but I'm only going to play the devil's advocate here because that's the term that they use. Was Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam a pedophile? In that he married Aisha, or made the contract of Aisha at 6 years old, and then he married her at 9 years old. I had a Muslim on my Facebook page, Muslim, say, I have struggled with this for years. I have struggled with this. Is there anybody here that struggles with this right now? No one? Everybody's clear on the fact that he married and consummated his marriage with a young girl at 9 years old? Oh, raise your hand. I mean, this is real talk. I mean, this is nothing to be ashamed of. Because what these panelists, what these speakers are going to do is help you to understand that and help you to respond when you are confronted with these things. You might be the only Muslim in your classroom in college. And your professor may bring up this discussion, and he's your professor, PhD holder, fancy degree, and he's standing in front of the class, and you're the only Muslim in your class, and then here he goes in on Muhammad, and you sitting in the back, don't know how to respond. So inshallah ta'ala, it's important that we have these discussions. So I'm going to start with Brother Abu Usamah. How do we respond to the fact that the Prophet ﷺ consummated the marriage with Aisha at 9 years old, and the arguments that are made against his character, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, accusing him of being a pedophile?
I'm here in New Jersey where my parents live, and I was with them on Thanksgiving. And we had quite a few relatives. They held hands, very close family. And my niece, who's a minister, wanted to make a prayer. But I took the opportunity to validate my presence, because we shouldn't be participating in these celebrations unless you're given dawah and other issues. So I explained to them that I'm not here for Thanksgiving. I'm here because I'm connecting my ties to you guys. I'm giving dawah. I don't believe in Thanksgiving. They oppress the Indians and Native Americans and so forth and so on. This issue, I would never bring this issue up to my parents and my relatives. I would avoid this issue to the best of my ability, because it's a big problem for them to understand. That's number one.
رباه يا رباه فاغفر خطيئتي